organising is taking place on. The organising for this conference has been happening on the lands of the Wurundjeri and the Wadawurrung people of the Kulin Nations and surrounding clans. Aboriginal people have resisted colonisation, and that resistance is ongoing, and their sovereignty has never been ceded. We would like to also acknowledge that people are speaking from multiple countries in this call, including our speaker Dani from Chile and the lands, Waumapu lands, on the lands of the Mapuche people of Chile and Argentina, who are also in ongoing resistance for over 500 years against colonization and the Chilean state. And so I'll just give a brief rundown of the agenda for today. We're going to have the panel to begin with, and we've got our 4 speakers. And then during the panel and throughout the conference, if anyone would, we're going to have a Q&A and small group discussions after the panel. So if people have questions for the speakers or in general, or have proposals for campaigns that are happening, actions, ideas, if they can add those into the chat, which is a part of the Zoom call, and Anissa, who's facilitating all our tech, will be collating those questions, and they can be fed into the group discussion after the panel. So, and if you have any questions about how to do that, maybe check in with Anissa. You can chat with Anissa or let us know. So I'll introduce our speakers. We have Dani, who's the speaker from Chile, who's part of Izquierda Guevarista de Chile, an anti-capitalist group organizing in Santiago and Chile. And we have Kegan Daly, who is a part of the Crisis Permaculture Response Group and the new On the Verge community farming campaign. We have Sebastian Herrara from the Renters Union Victoria and the rent and mortgage strike based in the Kulin Nations. And we have hopefully some other speakers who are having some technical difficulties, who are Rod Starz and G1 from Rebel Diaz, a revolutionary hip hop group, an activist collective based in the Bronx, Chicago. Hopefully we'll be able to join with us soon. So with that introduction, maybe we'll start off with our speakers and just handing it over to the panel with Dani from Izquierda Guevarista de Chile. Over to you, Dani.
Hi, thank you so much for the kind introduction. So I'm here in representation of the Izquierda Guevarista de Chile, an organization that I'm a part of, and I'm going to talk about the general context of COVID-19 in Chile and how we've been organizing under that, both as an organization and kind of as a people more generally. But in order to start that off, I kind of wanted to give a context of Latin American history and specifically Chilean history, just a little bit of a brief overview. In broad strokes, Latin America in general and Chile specifically are under the imperial thumb of the United States. And in the context of global capitalism, what that means is that Chile and Latin America's role is primarily to be the site of extraction of resources, often to the detriment of the local population in multiple ways, and also a market where goods can be imported and sold. And that, for the second half of the 20th century, meant that it was necessary to impose the neoliberal form of capitalism as the reigning form of capitalism in the world, which started out in Chile after the coup against Salvador Allende's democratically elected socialist government in 1973. Even though that was very obviously a violent imposition of the neoliberal capitalist system, it was also violent in other places that didn't necessarily have a coup. The imposition of neoliberalism always starts from a place of not having legitimacy, or at least legitimacy as conceived under like bourgeois democracy. Even in other places that weren't necessarily put under a dictatorship, the process was still a violent one. Although in Latin America, more often than not, it was through a dictatorship. After the return to bourgeois liberal democracy in 1990 through a vote. Neoliberalism and more broadly capitalism were still the reigning economic systems of Chile, which means in practice that the state becomes a subsidiary state instead of a welfare state, which had been the previous version of capitalism that was in place, which is supposed to mean that you have a small state and that mostly lets the market do its thing on social services, which includes the privatization of social services, including public health. Which is relevant in this particular case in the context of COVID-19 pandemic, obviously, also comes hand in hand with anti-worker, anti-union policies, and general precarious life conditions. It's important to note, though, that the idea that neoliberalism has that the state is supposedly small is in direct contradiction with the power that the state has used against the Mapuche struggle in the south of Chile, but that's just a note. So this context of neoliberalism and imperialism led to mounting sectorial struggles every few years in Chile. So that includes a struggle for a better education and pension system, which are demands that come back every few years, and also some other struggles such as the feminist struggle, which has had several peaks in the last few years, and a queer struggle, also various territorial struggles against polluters, especially in the mining industry, the agro and forestry industry too, in what we call sacrifice zones, which are zones where the soil is so polluted it's actually correlated with a very high rates of cancer and other diseases. And so this through the 90s and 2000s kind of has led to this PR bankruptcy of the neoliberal model, where it's just come to the point where people are seeing that the promises are not being materialized into reality. And so in that context, we arrive at what happened in October in Chile, which I'm sure most of you are somewhat familiar with this, but the events that went down starting the week of October 18th started out with a fare hike in the metro, which led to student protesting with mass fare evasions where they faced off against police, which was particularly brutal against these children. And the situation escalates into riots in the evening of October 18th, and a state of emergency is declared in Santiago and a few other regions, which kind of kickstarts the popular revolt, which is what we call it in my organization, the October Revolt. And this the state of emergency is declared, which allows the government to impose a curfew and bring out the armed forces into the streets. And that's how we get the amount of people that have lost an eye so far through rubber bullets, and people who have disappeared or died in that process. But that's the bad part. The good part is that it was also an unprecedented period of mass organizing through territorial assemblies, which, for those who aren't familiar, is basically an organism that arises from a particular neighborhood, which will organize around the necessities of that particular community in a totally autonomous way. And usually the decisions are made through sort of an assembly-like process where everybody gets to have a say, and that's kind of like how they operate. Through the territorial assemblies, different forms of organization also come up. Ollas comunes, I guess you could translate that as like common meals, are organized by these territorial assemblies, and they become seen more often. This is when like the territorial assembly will get together, cook a meal, and anybody who lives or is passing through the area can stop by and grab a plate. It's a pretty tangible form of community organizing in a situation of like precarious life conditions. So this wasn't just like mass mobilization, it was true mass organization, which constitutes a pretty strong basis for building people power in a repressive context. A few other things that came out of the revolt was questions regarding the legitimacy of the capitalist system, specifically in its neoliberal form, but also more generally, and the development of a discourse around class struggle, which has not quite reached the point of being described in terms of proletariat versus bourgeoisie, but there is definitely the dynamic of poor versus rich, or oppressed versus oppressors, normal people versus ruling class, which begins to kind of develop into a perspective on class struggle. The government loses absolutely every shred of legitimacy it ever had, which was already minimal. And another important factor is the legitimization of violence as self-defense against state repression, which you can pretty clearly see in Chilean media and social media, where people talk about the first line against police repression being the people who will come to the front of protest and basically defend against state repression in that way. So zooming back into the current COVID-19 context in the pandemic, largely it has not been good. The pandemic response is essentially being used as a weapon by the state and the bourgeois class in a context of class struggle. Particularly quarantines have been imposed only on certain sectors of the city, depending on the rate of contagion. And even though they haven't been very efficient at actually decreasing the amount of people on the streets, you still see increased military presence, particularly in shanty towns and working class or poor neighborhoods, especially those with a history of being more combative or those that have been consistently more on the vanguard of class struggle, neighborhoods like Luermida or Villa Francia in the Santiago metropolitan region. And so that's because the state of catastrophe, which was declared to handle the pandemic, allows the state to bring out armed forces to quote unquote help with pandemic relief efforts, but the actual effect that that's having is just normalizing military presence in working class and poor neighborhoods. So that leads to increased vigilance. Also, police presence has been on the rise, especially in similarly vulnerable places. And there have been several incidents that otherwise would probably not have been possible, like 10 people being shot and injured a few days ago at a protest, or a minor under 15 killed for a robbery at a shantytown despite not having a weapon. So this kind of escalates the violence being seen by the working class, and normalizes for even people who maybe aren't living in directly violent conditions. It does normalize the presence of state armed forces just out and about. On top of that, there's also general mismanagement in terms of how quarantines or lockdowns are held and partial, and workers are being forced to rely on their own savings for income when their companies will like freeze their job position, and legislation generally protects the interests of the capitalist class. So this kind of increased vigilance and military presence, and also the continuous lockdowns, have made organizing difficult, but not impossible. So some of the more vanguard sectors of the working class are organizing, especially in shanty towns and working class neighborhoods, still through the territorial assemblies, that some of them were older than the October Revolt, but some of them are new or more reactivated from October. And so, for example, a comrade's territorial assembly has been delivering meals and supplies to those who need it in his neighborhood in a totally self-managed, self-financed way. Yesterday, they delivered over 120 meals, and the few days before, they started this program at the beginning of the week. So the few days before each day, they delivered between 70 and 110 meals. There have also been small-scale protests and direct actions at the local level, also usually planned through territorial assemblies, especially around a few significant dates at the end of March and April that commemorated specific things. So the activity is still happening, even though it's reduced. In my comrades' territorial assembly, they also led a fairly successful campaign, completely autonomous, against petty theft in their territory. Obviously not in like a fashy way or anything, but it shows that the communities are able to take care of themselves when they are organized. Some organizing is also sectorial instead of being territorial. For example, there's a coordinating body that assists political prisoners from the October Revolt and other political prisoners as well, which has been steadily gathering supplies and raising money to buy food and other supplies for political prisoners. Though with the most recent quarantines, which were mandated a few days ago, it will become harder to do that job, but people are still actively participating and actively donating to, or giving money in solidarity to these causes. Lots of independent press and similar collectives are still active, but the most advanced sector of the working class is definitely organizing through territorial assemblies. On a note not related to the Chilean people, but the Mapuche people, they have been in the South, which is where they are localized for the most part, have also taken a much more openly combative stance in the past few months, not necessarily since October, but since March. So with that, I kind of wanted to project myself a little bit forward. It's pretty clear in Chile and in the world that we're nearing a crisis of capitalism that's going to sharpen contradictions in every sense. And the increase in autonomous and territorial mass organization that has happened in the Chilean territory has shown, again, that it has clear potential to be at the vanguard of the struggle and is a solid basis for popular power, especially since a lot of it remains in place even in this particularly difficult context. So it's necessary for us to push forward along this line to further our revolutionary goals. On top of that, the ruling class is unstable, and contradictions between what the bourgeois state says and the reality that the working class lives are growing more stark, in the same way that contrast between classes is also growing more stark. But we still require mass mobilization to trigger a true crisis for the bourgeois state. So the more mass organization we have, especially at the territorial and autonomous level, and the weaker the relationship within the ruling classes are, the harder it will be for the bourgeois interests to maintain their hold on society, is kind of the analysis that we're doing of this situation. That's what I have for you today. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Dani. We're going to move on to the next speaker in the panel, which are Rodrigo and G1 from Rebel Diaz, which is a revolutionary hip-hop group and activist collective based in the Bronx of Chicago. Over to you, Rod and G.
We can't hear you. Can other people hear Rodrigo?
Peace. Can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
This is G1.
Yeah, can hear you, G.
Peace, everybody. We're not sure what Rod's microphone issue is. Would you like to cut to something else for now, or would you like for me to speak? I'm down for either one. But I would definitely, I think Rod's input coming from New York and what's happening over there is very valuable. I'm in Chicago right now, so peace to everybody out there in so-called Australia. Peace to LastNet. Peace to everybody on board. So nice to see so many familiar faces. I think that it's important that we hear Rod, and so would it be good if we jump to something else for now while I troubleshoot with him?
Yep, no worries. Okay, maybe we'll cut over to Kegan Daly. Kegan's from the Permaculture Crisis Response Group and Community Gardening. Over to you, Kegan.
Thanks very much. I'd like to acknowledge that I am on the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation and that their sovereignty has never been ceded. I'd like to pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging, and acknowledge that the struggle we engage in is a struggle for Indigenous land rights and a reconnection to country. So I'd like to start by going through some of the history of permaculture activism to try to give it some context in the current moment and how it intersects with struggles against capitalism. And outline some of the theories of change that are used to confront it, and then bring it back to the current moment and what the group's hoping to achieve into the future. So permaculture very concisely is a set of ethics and design principles. The ethics are simply earth care, people care, and fair share, which is suggesting that we need to give people what they need to survive, as well as setting limits on our own personal consumption. So those ethics are very much perennial ethics, universal ethics that can be found in cultures throughout history, throughout the planet. The interesting part of permaculture, which kind of separates it a little bit from what's gone before, is the ethical design principles, which are essentially an attempt to distill ecology and Indigenous wisdom into a framework that can be understood by people who have become disconnected from that wisdom and that knowledge. So it's essentially an attempt to rehash ancient wisdom for the modern mind, or the mind of the Westerner that's been somewhat stuffed with through the Enlightenment. And personally, I think it's a fairly good attempt. It's quite transparent in that it is drawing upon those rich traditions. I'll send through some links as I go along for people to do their own research. But the cultural moment that permaculture arose in was in the 60s and 70s, when a lot of activists were becoming disenchanted with the oppositional politics of social movements trying to confront capitalism and bring it down. People were becoming burnt out, demoralized with that struggle. And there was a large movement, whether or not you call it back to the land, but people wanted to try to reconnect with a more positive vision of creating alternatives that could replace capitalism. And one of the founding assumptions of that was that the best way to destroy capitalism was simply to withdraw from it and create alternative means of production that would destroy capitalist relations. So that looked like essentially recreating relationships with one another, with the land, that were just and ecologically sound. So you had lots of attempts to, develop communes and things like that. So figuring out how to relocalize the economy to produce all the food and fiber that we needed in a way that didn't completely destroy the land. So that's a little bit of the history and the theory of change that permaculture uses when it's approaching community organizing. And so where that ties into the current moment is that one of the first things that was noticed as the COVID-19 crisis began to unfold was that people had this intuitive response to go out and begin buying seeds, seedlings, chickens, compost. People began gardening again because they realized that in order to survive crisis, they need to be able to look after themselves. And that's very much the premise of permaculture thinking, that during the 60s and 70s, the crisis of capitalism began to be understood as an environmental crisis as well as an ethical crisis. And so permaculture is founded on this idea that we are heading towards the abyss, whether it's conceived of as peak oil or peak water or soil depletion, whatever it may look like, we are heading towards a precipice and we need to be prepared for that. So permaculture, as it was originally conceived, it's essentially a set of ethics and techniques that are really well designed to deal with crisis. And we found that people were very quickly leaning into that idea without there being any overarching organizational infrastructure encouraging them to do so. So whereas in the, say in World War I and World War II, there was this victory garden campaign that governments organized in order to help localize food production as supply chains began to break down. And so the same thing has begun to occur during this crisis. And so, yeah, realizing this was all happening, the group that I'm aligned with, the Permaculture Crisis Group, we kind of saw this as an opportunity to begin mobilizing the expertise in the community around permaculture and food gardening and begin to imagine what it would actually look like if we kept taking steps in the logical direction where people's intuitions were heading. So at this point in time, we were hoping that there'll be some shift in consciousness. And I don't use that in I don't use that in an immaterial way. I use that in a connection between the material reality of the crisis and people's ways of perceiving that material reality. So people are realizing that they need to be able to look after themselves and one another. And so one of the trends that have come out of the crisis is this, this organic arising of mutual aid groups. So people are inclined towards caring and cooperation for the care of the most vulnerable in crises like the one we're currently facing. And so if we keep heading in that logical direction and we assume that the future is going to be full of crises, whether it's climate crises, whether it's fascism, authoritarianism, whether it's the breakdown of global supply chains, when that happens, we have a large proportion of the population whose good natures are mobilized. And so if we can harness this energy and this shifting consciousness and to mobilize around it and to then hopefully institutionalize it, then we're looking at something like a really significant restructuring of the global economy, sorry, the local economy, and then by virtue the global economy, which can help ease the exploitation of capitalism. So one of the things that people, I think, don't acknowledge when they want to go down the permaculture route or the relocalization route, they don't, it's implicit that a part of that theory of change is that if we withdraw from the global capitalist system of production, what we're actually doing is we're actually hopefully minimizing and erasing the exploitative relationships that that people like myself in the advanced world, so to speak, or the Western world, those relationships of exploitation that we set up that advantage us. So if we can look after ourselves, let's say, that those systems of exploitation will hopefully completely dissolve. So the movement towards a relocalization of production using permaculture principles and ethics is actually an attempt to abolish capitalism. So just bringing that back a little bit to the present moment, so that's some of the thinking that I was personally going through when the idea for this permaculture crisis response group came up. And the way it began to unfold was essentially wanting to facilitate the meeting of people who have had experience in relocalizing food production, for example, bringing these people together and create an opportunity to vision what a crisis response would look like in this moment, but also more importantly into the future, because this is just the beginning of a very drawn out crisis. And so using the moment as a springboard to vision what the future looks like. So the way we did that is that we brought together, there was just a few of us to begin with, and we'd had a little bit of experience in people's assemblies and collaborative, deliberative, participatory forms of decision-making and organizing. And so using that democratic framework to bring people together via Zoom was the initial sort of way we did it. And so from then, we've been attempting to vision what a group would look like into the future. We're beginning to look at decision-making processes. So using consensus and collaboration as the foundations of future organizing. Yeah, so it's a very surreal moment that we're living in, where all organising frameworks of the past have kind of gone out the window for a moment, and now we're slowly inching towards a normalization, or a renormalization of the way we organise. So we're trying to figure out how to organise in this moment, while also realising there will be a future that will hopefully mean that out of this crisis, we've built something that can stand the test of time and will prevent us from forgetting. Because I think that's the biggest fear we have, that, you know, the bushfires in Australia have all but been forgotten about. And as capitalism starts to ramp back up again, like we've already had the Australian Prime Minister come out yesterday, basically saying we are preparing to bring back economic growth bigger and better than ever. And for someone like me that kind of sees economic growth as that is the conceptual kind of devil as far as I'm concerned. And so when you have the Prime Minister of Australia using words like that, you know that any kind of learnings that we've gained from this moment are just going to be squashed completely. And so, yeah, part of what our group is trying to do is to create a space where we can use the crisis as kind of like a narrative to give authority to whatever comes afterwards. Because we're trying to say that we all experienced this thing together, and we intuitively did certain things around looking after ourselves and food gardening, and we need to take that into the future, and we need to institutionalize those techniques and those intuitions into some sort of institutional framework that we can expand upon as the crises keep rolling out. So just to quickly finish up, not sure how long I've been speaking for, but probably too long. Our first campaign is a very humble campaign in my mind, but it speaks to this idea of reclaiming public land for the purposes of food production. So what we're encouraging people to do in what we're dubbing the On the Verge campaign is to go out into their streets, reclaim their nature strips and their verges for food gardening. But not only that, to take the mutual aid concept and applying it with that bit of public land. So the idea of food gardening, sharing food with your neighbours, and getting to know one another and creating relationships which we can embrace into the future, and particularly when they're most needed, which is in times of crisis. So the idea is essentially that we're going to encourage people to grow food on their verge. We've got a group of horticulturalists, landscape designers, community organisers, which are available to help people in the community that want to become organisers in this area. So we're essentially trying to empower people to become community organisers, around these issues. So I think I've rambled for long enough. So thank you, and look forward to the discussion and the questions ahead.
Great, thanks, Kegan. We'll head now on to Sebastian Herrara to talk about the Red Strike and the Renters Union of Victoria. Over to you, Sebastian.
Hi, everybody. So I am I'm one of the organisers. I kind of joined up in late March as part of the Rent Strike in so-called Victoria in Australia. Basically, the Rent Strike started in the week of the 16th of March. So that was around about the time where the lockdown started to occur. For me particularly, I work in entertainment, I work in a theatre. So essentially my entire industry, practically over the course of about 50 hours, just completely disappeared. So around that time, the Rent Strike was launched. It was originally launched by the IWW, the Industrial Workers of the World. It was a megaphone kind of pledge campaign. By the end of that week, I think 10,000 pledges have been made across all of Australia to commence rent striking, essentially because it was already clear by then that even though the rest of the economy in this country was essentially falling off of a cliff, we had landlords and real estate agents pretty much determined from the get-go to act like it was forever going to be February 2020. Nothing had changed, and everyone was still expected to pay rent as if nothing was different. So the rent strike was declared, 10,000 pledges, which was a pretty overwhelming response. I put a link to the website in the chat, but maybe got blocked, which is fair enough. The website was launched outlining just basically the general demands of the rent strike. And in the last week of March, letters got sent out to 100 different real estate agents, basically outlining the demands of the strike, which was essentially a full rent and mortgage amnesty over the course of the pandemic, and no blacklisting for anyone that wasn't paying rent. And it kind of did put the fear of God into the industry, because there was a big flare up. A Facebook page was launched, and it was basically flooded, not with just tenants and people sharing their experiences and also asking for advice, but also, real estate agents and landlords basically having a go at anyone entitled enough to want a reduction in rent after having lost their jobs. So basically, on the 7th of April, so I'm kind of condensing the timeline down by quite a bit. We're talking about a matter of like 3 weeks, but I'm sure you can all imagine at the time, something really strange happened with our conception of time. I think this happened around the world, where I think decades happened in the space of about 3 weeks. So I'm skipping over a lot of things, but essentially over the 7th of April, after what felt like an eternity, the state government of Victoria announced a policy where they were going to essentially give $500 million to basically rent or to kind of assist in the matter. It was $500 million, but when you kind of really dug into the policy, 420 million of it was going to go to tax breaks for landlords. So once again, if you were a tenant or a renter or anything like that, you were essentially being left out in the cold. As an aside, that was like the worst use of 420 I've ever heard in my life. So a few laws, as well as that kind of financial kickback, a few laws were introduced. There was no rent amnesty, but there was a ban put on evictions. So any notice to vacate that tenants had been receiving from kind of landlords trying to milk everything they could get out of tenants. Anything past, I think anything after the end of March was essentially null and void. So there were a few kind of small wins from that announcement. Rent was, there was a ban on all increases in rent, and you couldn't be blacklisted as a tenant if you could show hardship as a result of the pandemic. The problem with all these kind of new laws and financial assistance that was being announced is that it came with a number of caveats and conditions that, again, put all the power and all the negotiating power back in the hands of the landlords and the real estate agents. And so it really did nothing to equalize that massive power disparity that existed, since before the pandemic. And so essentially the reason why this rent strike, I think, really kind of touched the nerve, essentially, with tenants, and why it's kind of slowly morphing into something else, which I'll get to, is that I think people were becoming more aware that they were being expected to negotiate as individuals. So as an individual household or as an individual tenant, like myself, against someone who's got the economic and essentially the political power to strip you of your shelter. And you're supposed to sit down, and the Prime Minister of this country and the state government, the Premier, were basically sitting, kind of making out that you should be able to sit at a table like equals and negotiate this crisis together. And you could tell it was apparent from the beginning that was never going to be the case. And that all the stories and the experiences that people were sharing on the Facebook group with the correspondences they were having with their landlords was proof from the very beginning that that was never going to be the situation. So as a result of that reality and how underwhelming the government's response was, basically discussion of a tenants union in the meetings and the online meetings that the organizers of the rent strike had been kind of having, discussion of a tenants union kind of propped up pretty quickly, like almost, I think probably the same week that the strike itself was declared, because there is a sort of tenants union, at least here in Victoria, but it's got lots of strings tied to the state government itself. So it's not really a grassroots, it's not really there. It's more of an advocacy branch rather than any sort of fighting union to really fight against, to really represent your average tenant. I think when it started in the 70s, that's kind of what its point was. But then over time, it's just drifted into like a kind of weird branch of the government. So discussion of a proper fighting union representing tenants and other people in precarious housing came up pretty quickly in those meetings. And I'm kind of happy to say, as of this Monday past, it was voted up in the last meeting that we had, that we were going to launch a renters and housing union, basically with the idea of continuing to defend, to assist tenants that are having problems with their landlords and their agents, also to share information. Because one weapon that a lot of real estate agents have had in their arsenal over the last few months is that they've been very good at spreading a lot of misinformation and making themselves look more important than they really are. They send out these forms where you're expected to fill it out, and they make the forms look like something from the government or from the tax office, and they make it look very officious and very fancy when they're really not. These people are they're working out of shops next to fish and chip shops at the corner of your suburb, right? But they're trying to look very important, and it is actually doing a good job of intimidating tenants and making them think that they owe all this information. They want to know bank statements, pay slips, all this information that we actually quietly think might be illegal to ask for or to demand at least. So what we're trying to do, at least in the short term, is get a website up, declaring the new union, but also to kind of start really consolidating information that tenants can use in the negotiation. Because unfortunately, a rent strike doesn't work if there's no, unless there's actual solidarity and a commitment to the cause. And what we saw pretty quickly was most people were ignoring the rent strike bit and using the Facebook groups to just liaise with each other in navigating the negotiations with their real estate agents, which was a bit disappointing, but that's the way it played out. We're kind of on the tail end of 40 years, I think, 30, 40 years straight of neoliberal ideology in this country. So people don't have a conception of that kind of solidarity and collectivism that's required to make this work. That's one of the challenges going forward that we're going to have to try and cultivate. So people, with the best of intentions joined up, and then we're basically just asking for advice and sharing advice on how to negotiate as individuals. So medium term, what we're trying to do as the union gets up is start pushing for collective negotiation with real estate agencies and maybe even the industry itself. I think in my mind, that's modeled after the way trade unions negotiate in the workplace. Instead of having workers negotiate individually with their managers, the union sits there and represents the entire workforce in that particular workplace or in that particular industry. So what we're doing, or the project as it's kind of going, is to try and institute some kind of organization that can do something similar for tenants. The details of which still very much need to be worked out. But that's kind of the idea. The immediate challenges of doing this is obviously, how do you build a sense of solidarity, both within amongst the organizers themselves and just the broader, tenant community. It's a bit of a contradiction that we have to try and get our heads around. Is we're trying to build this movement in a period of extreme isolation because of the virus. And so these kind of webinars and stuff are all well and good, but it's not quite the same as when you have a meeting in person. I'm sure you all kind of are aware of that, because you can kind of make these personal connections. So that's very much like the immediate challenge, because what we're worried about in the next couple of months, these temporary laws that have been implemented, as inadequate as they are, they're going to be repealed, that are there to defend tenants. As inadequate as they are, they're going to be repealed in a couple of months. And what we're expecting is a wave of evictions of angry landlords and real estate agents basically try and squeeze blood from a stone. And so we're trying to get ready for that and try to have some sort of organization, some sort of movement in place to really put up a fight against these evictions. That's the immediate challenge of, like, how do we create this organization online that could somehow function in the real world as well? And that's going to create a lot of work. However, I want to end this on a slightly, I guess, optimistic note, is that as grim as a lot of things are, and there's a whole host of challenges that need to be overcome, one thing that I see as an opportunity, at least in this country, is that for the first time, people are actually becoming very aware. People that ordinarily aren't concerned with these kind of matters because they're, middle class and quite comfortable in their lives, or as comfortable as they think they can be. For the first time, people are well aware of the exploitative nature of just the economic status quo as it was, whether it comes to housing or whether in the workplace. People suddenly have become very, very aware of how exploitative that relationship is. I mean, the other day I was talking to a manager, and they were talking about how capitalism's failed and socialism may be the new way to go. I mean, 2 months ago, you'd never hear a manager at a workplace say something like that. And by the same right, you've got people that own their own homes or tenants who can still make rent even now, talking about how, no, this isn't right, something's going to change. So if we can overcome that challenge of how we can get people together in a period of extreme isolation, I think there is a massive opportunity there to start building coalitions and comradeship in places where we never dreamed of before. And I'm kind of excited to see where this goes in the next couple of months. And that's my spiel. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Sebastian. All right, great. To finish the panel, we're going to go to G1 and Starz from Revolt Diaz. Over to you guys.
Se escucha. Aló, aló. Eso, saludos a todos. Peace to everybody. We're hoping that that Rod Starz can get on. I think that he was setting up his mic there. But I'd like to, I guess I'll start for now. I'm coming in from Chicago right now. And I'm thousands of miles away. But the stories that I'm hearing you guys share are very similar to what's happening over here. Is there any way for me to share my video, my screen?
Oh, yep, I can allow you to do that.
You know what it is? I was just looking at some of the pictures I have on my phone. I think that they paint a very vivid picture of what the situation here is in the U.S. in terms of the virus of capitalism that we're dealing with.
You should be able to share your screen now.
I'm sorry?
You should be able to share your screen now.
Okay, cool. Let me see if it lets me do it. Oh no, that's not letting me do it. It's fine. Oh, here we go. Okay, boom. Okay, cool. So you should be, are you seeing my screen now? Hello, y'all seeing my screen now?
Yes.
All right, cool. So I'm gonna show you real quick. Okay, this is in, y'all seeing that right now?
Yep.
All right, this is in Las Vegas. where there's millions of dollars with gambling and you know, and a lot of capital invested into some of capitalism's vices. And these are homeless people, houseless people that are being put on the street in parking lots where they paint the ground of the parking lot to separate people, homeless people, supposedly social distance, 6 feet apart on the ground. I'm gonna flip through a couple more pictures. You might see some pictures of my daughter's homework. But this is another picture that I think is illustrates what's happening in the US. This is in New York City. This is an island right next to New York City where they're burying poor people that have died from COVID-19. And the people that are digging the graves are prisoners, incarcerated people that are locked up in nearby Rikers Island that are being put to dig the graves of poor people who can't afford to be able to have proper funerals or proper burial places. And so just this, to me, this picture, the people there in white are incarcerated people that are being put into forced labor to dig the graves. And so to me, that picture encapsulates the situation here in the US, which is a mass incarceration state, very similar obviously to the conditions in Australia, and where you have, you know, again, poor people digging the graves of other poor people. That's my daughter's homework. That's my daughter's homework. This is another location where they, again, are putting homeless people in these places supposedly to social distance, but are putting them there. It's almost like a prison. They're creating almost prisons for people that don't have homes, and you have all these empty condominiums, empty hotels. Okay, and so you have all the let's take care of our health workers, and people come out and clap, right? Here's another picture of them again, of homeless people being put on the street. Okay, here's in Tampa Bay. In Tampa Bay, they stepped it up and gave them tents. Ridiculous. All right, ignoring the humanity, all right, of our people. You have here, you know, the fancy places that are boarded up because they're scared that they're gonna lose their possessions there. Okay, and so I just wanted to share those pictures. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen now. Did everybody see that? Okay, cool. So I just wanted to share that because as I was preparing to share with y'all, and I wasn't sure if Rodrigo was gonna get on, and he had also a lot of great input to share.
Can y'all hear me?
Yay!
Is he on?
Man, I got, this is like the regular audio. I had a high tech, look at this. I want to show y'all. I had a whole, but that shit is old school style. What up, Sunil? Keeping it real. Good to see all my people, my comrades. Y'all can hear me?
Yes, Rob, we can hear you. We can
I can't
see
hear
you,
y'all, but y'all can hear me. These headphones are worthless. Look, I want to just send solidarity, first of all, you know what I'm saying, to my people in Australia. It's good to see all the faces. I see Marisol, I see everybody, but Lucho, what up? It's an honor, because I got mad love for y'all to even have been invited to this, but what's going on in New York, from what I heard, is no different than what's going on with y'all. Like, there's an over-policing. In the name of social distancing, the police have been super violent in the last week. We had a racist, white supremacist murder, a lynching, a modern-day lynching happen in Georgia, where you had Ahmaud Arbery. This is something that just came out and happened before the pandemic, but I think it's very telling of the environment, of the kind of the way that the world is moving now. In the name of social distancing, there's attacks in our community, various police brutality incidents in the last 5 days. Like in the last 5 days, there's been like 10 videos that have gone viral of NYPD beating up young folks that, you know, a lot of times don't have the conditions to really be at home during the pandemic. You know what I mean? They don't have a the luxury of staying home. And so what we're seeing is an over-policing. This is nothing new. We've been policed, but now the police have gotten a green light. Today, the NYPD commissioner said that it's not police brutality for the cops to punch people. This is what the police commissioner went on the news and said, that it's not police brutality for them to punch people, that is part of their training, which we've all known all along, but to finally hear them say it is like, oh, okay, y'all really are, in Spanish, how my Boricua fan would say, ustedes son unos descarados. Like now they don't even, now they just being blunt about it. Like, yeah, punching is part of our training. As far as rent, a similar situation in which we're not seeing, you know, there's a bailout for Wall Street, a bailout for the flight, you know, industry, but there's no bailout for folks. There's no moratorium on rent, and there's no moratorium on mortgages. And so people are being forced to rent. We have, I believe the number's at 33 million people unemployed, okay? These are record numbers. What we're gonna be seeing is, we're seeing a government of Trump that has openly said that more than 200,000 people will die as a result of them opening the economy too early. So they'd rather save the economy than human lives. That's going on right now. And we're clear that the people that are dying are the people that are marginalized communities. Elders, Black, the brown. In New York, the highest numbers are in Queens, a community of immigrants, the second highest number in the Bronx. In New York City, there's been, out of like the 70,000 people that have died in the United States, 70,000 deaths, more than in the Vietnam War. You know what I'm saying? This is literally, they've you know, wreaked havoc in Black and brown and poor communities in the west side of Chicago and Detroit. And what we're seeing is that the real pandemic is capitalism. We're clear that the real virus is capitalism, and had created these health disparities that existed before. That existed before the pandemic, before coronavirus. In the hood, there was diabetes, AIDS, you know, high blood pressure. And so, we'll, you know, because of not having access to a health system already. And so what we're seeing now is that, of course, a virus that attacks a weakened immune system is going to wreak havoc, because those health disparities were already there before. And so it's crazy just to see that the government has openly said that more than 200,000 people will die as a result of them opening up these the economy. That's kind of the situation here. We're trying to figure out how to organize against the police brutality. I'll give it, there's been some activists that, you know, while we're over here thinking, they grabbed a truck and started just driving with a megaphone, and, you know, they're still practicing social distancing. The response of the mayor and the governor is that under social distancing, they can't, protests are illegal now. This has been said in New York, that there's gonna be zero tolerance for protests. And so, you know, we have to see, because I think that we have to assume that this is the new reality. The world that we knew before, when we were visiting y'all a year ago, because it was a year ago, right around this time, that was a memory, and that's it. We're not gonna, the world as we know it now is gonna be this. You know what I mean? This is sadly the new communication. This is our reality. And how do we, as activist organizers on an international level, share tactics with us? You know what I'm saying? Even mastering these new technologies, you know what I'm saying, this is new for us. You know what I'm saying? And so how do we adapt? I think is a big piece. How do we, as communities, also start looking at projects that we can create autonomously from the system? I think now more than ever is the time for autonomous projects, food programs. You know what I'm saying? I am the most gardening dude I know. I'm OG, but I'm not an original gardener, but I'm learning, because I realize that I gotta get, you know what I'm saying? I don't wanna eat COVID-19 chicken from the meat packing plant that Trump is forcing to keep open because he doesn't want the meat industry to die. I'm trying to eat broccoli and asparagus, but I don't want to eat COVID-19 broccoli, so how do we plant our own foods? I think these are realities that we need to face head on. And I know folks have been doing it for years and we may be late, but I just think that more than ever is a time now for, you know, autonomous living and trying to really survive outside of the system. Even us as musicians, how do we adapt ourselves as cultural workers to an economy that the world, like, we're not going to perform in front of 50 people, 100 people easily until a year and a half from now, if that, you know? And so how do we as cultural workers, you know what I'm saying, adapt and get down with these new technologies and as activists as well? I know if I'm repeating stuff, I missed a lot of what was being said, but I do think that we definitely need to assume that the world as we knew it has changed. You know what I mean? Our educational systems are going to change. I think that we need to be really, really, you know, open and look into that, because here, I don't know how it is over there, but immediately they're doing the idea of getting rid of schools, that the new technologies, they're saying, why do we have to pay for these buildings? And why do we have to pay for your lunch when we can just teach you? That gets rid of teaching assistants. It gets rid of cultural classes, of art, music. And this is gonna happen. This is disaster capitalism 2020, in which the educational system is about to be digital, in which the so-called essential workers within the next year can be, even right now, they have the technology to replace essential workers. Maybe not the nurses, but they have a technology to replace the folks that are doing delivery. UPS and Amazon have started doing drone deliveries more than ever. We've seen the concepts of getting rid of the workers. So all these Walmart workers that nowadays are being, you know, praised, the economy has no use for them with the technology that they're about to implement. And now more than ever, we're seeing the merger of technology and capital. And I think that it's gonna be more than ever. Today, Cuomo, the governor of New York, who's been getting a lot of love for his so-called presidential way of, you know, addressing the nation. I hadn't seen him smile like in a week, and he was all giddy because he had a meeting with the Google, you know, founders and with Bill Gates, and they're already moving. This is already in motion, where the educational system as we knew it has changed and won't go back to what it was. I guarantee you that. And so I think that we need to, you know, be alert and as a movement adapt to all these new things that are coming on. That's my little update. I love y'all. It feels great to see familiar faces. Marion, you know what I'm saying? Joe, everybody. One love. G Weezy. I don't even know if you can hear me, but
I heard
cool.
you, Rod. I heard you. We all heard you, brother. Appreciate that.
I can't hear you guys, which is crazy.
We're gonna get a thumbs up and the people power fist.
Okay, are we performing now, or that's later in the?
Later on. Thanks,
Right,
heaps.
okay.
Thanks, guys.
I'm
Awesome.
gonna mute myself.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Thanks to all of the speakers for that panel. We're gonna go into a poem and dance performance by Kathleen from Ethnodanceology, who's a Colombian, Melbourne-based dancer and artist, doing her performance Tactful Spaces life form, which is just a short performance of 5 minutes. And then from there, Anissa's going to put people into small groups for 5 or 10 minutes, just for a bit of a break, chat with people about the thoughts, ideas, questions from the panel. And then we're going to go into a small music clip and then into a Q&A discussion. So I'll hand it over to you, Kathleen.
Kathleen, you're on mute. Unmute.
We are playing. Okay. Thanks for having me. I feel very humble right now, and because yes, from what starts this quarantine has been quite hard, and from all my community, my friends, my family, And because in here I'm in Australia, and I am separate of my family, and so it's quite demanding to adapt and to resist and to be strong and be determined about your thoughts and about your ethics, and how you can get in very deep in the profound of your soul and your spirit to keep lifting and working in these sort of gatherings and doing actions that actually at the moment are really an inspiration and as something that we really need to stimulate ourselves to keep living. I did this video. I hope you enjoy. And yeah, the idea is like how we can cultivate and keep community more strong than ever, because now you see we are from different places, from different countries, and so the idea is to keep building and keep being more and more and more and strong. We can have different solutions, and I know that we have a lot of potential to adapt and do the resolution that we need and keep living and fighting and resisting. Yeah, thank you. Yes.
Okay.
The cure is within us. It is time. Defending human nature creates immunity that breaks fear. Doing it, self-doubt can be suppressed to be trust. Let's do it with intention. It is a tribute to ourselves. The time has come to be alone, to walk our own way, to own our dream time, to clarify things for us. We need to see things where they are not mixed. The essence of the space that ignites the reflection. Then we can heal when we see it. We need to change as time and space demand it. Balanced homeostasis. It respects the interstellar space of living matter, non-cellular life, cells, life clot, metabolism, humanity adapting to evolve. The core of all our perceptions is the experience. In itself is the sacred and universal understanding. Let the voice of the heart guide us. There is the true resolution and revolution. We are part of divine creation, being present, being calm with your mind in silence, and your heart contemplating evolution. Communities are fighting for freedom right now. By doing these meetings, we all bring knowledge and dialogue between them, between us, to inspire confidence to act. The existence deserves it. Freedom, evolution, resistance, and action.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Kathleen. That was incredible. Now we're going to break into, Anise is going to put us in the small groups for 5-10 minutes, just to have some chat and debrief and discussion before we hear Sebastian and go into the Q&A. So see you all in the groups. Hello. Maybe we all have to unmute ourselves.
Sorry, everybody. The breakout rooms are being a bit strange. It was only making 2 rooms.
Okay.
Just
Thanks
everyone.
everyone for the patience.
Yeah, I think everyone needs to leave them and then I need to make new ones.
Okay.
Sorry. Went wrong. Give me 30 seconds.
I'm gonna head off. I'll be back soon. This is one group or no?
Okay, cool.
I don't know. I don't know.
I just need to add. Okay, there we go. Now, please go into your room. If anyone needs any help getting into a room, just let me know. Huh. Oh, the letter from Princess. Have fun. Sorry, I can't come.
I accidentally pulled us back to the main session.
Are we all back here now, Nice?
Hola, chiquillos, chiquillas.
Some people have a countdown, so some people are still in the room for 40 seconds.
Okay, all right. Maybe I'll introduce Sebastian's music.
Yes.
Yeah,
We're
there's
gonna-
still 1, 2, 3, 4 people in the breakout rooms.
Okay.
Okay, all right. Well, it's a long introduction.
Okay for a coffee? Yeah. Another coffee? Have time for a coffee? Yeah.
You can get a coffee whenever you want, Lucho.
Or maybe I'll introduce Sebastian. So Sebastian, we're going to have a little clip coming up with a 3-minute music clip from Sebastian Barahona. Sebastian is a Chilean music producer and performer based in Melbourne. His compositions combine traditional methods of music creation with modern electronic instruments and sound design. Based on his interest in diverse cultural backgrounds and creative approaches, Sebastian is now looking for artistic collaborators and organizations in order to promote social change. This acid jazz song called Insolente is a mock of various Chilean politicians' phrases that have caused big impact on the social state of the country. Most of them are taken from the latest social explosion because of the inequality, and a few of the phrases were responsible to trigger the same event. The song aims to inspire courage and soothing through music and sense of humor. So we'll listen to the song, and if people have other questions or proposals, just send them into the chat, and then afterwards we'll come into the group for question and answer.
Han caído las flores, el precio de las flores. So it now roll up.
Arréglalo, ni me cable. Arréglalo de combat. Ya de combatamos.
Las Fuerzas Armadas.
Que no ha terminado la guerra.
Y las fuerzas de orden. Esta nunca ha sido dictadura. Para los románticos. Estamos en guerra. un enemigo poderoso que no respeta a nada, que está dispuesto a quemar nuestros hospitales, nuestras estaciones del metro, con el único propósito producir el mayor daño posible.
Estamos en una guerra, que no ha terminado la guerra. Que no ha terminado. Que no ha terminado. Terminado la guerra.
Han caído las flores, el precio de las flores.
Arréglalo, Dani, table. Arréglalo de combat. Ya no le combatamos.
Las Fuerzas Armadas
Que no ha terminado la guerra.
y las fuerzas de orden.
Esta nunca ha sido dictadura.
En guerra.
Esta blanca.
Esto no aprendió. Que están cumpliendo en forma ejemplar.
Blanca.
A carabineros de Chile. Esto no aprendió. En guerra. Nunca dar la cara.
Esta blanca.
Porque son en el fondo cobardes.
Great. Is that the end of the clip, Anissa?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. All right, thank you. And thanks to Sebastian for sharing that music with us. All right, we're going to go into the Q&A section. And so there's been a couple of different questions put forward into the chat. So people can continue to add questions and ideas and proposals in there, and we'll read them out as we go. And so I'll go to the first question, and maybe if you want to speak, just raise your hand, and Anissa can, and you can, Anissa can keep track of the speakers list, and we'll continue the discussion. So the first question in the chat is from Marisol. She asked how to organize in the time of pandemic. So maybe to the speakers and also just to, in general, to other people here present. How to organize in time of pandemic.
Go Kegan. You had a hand?
Hyper local, because the only accepted contact per se is with those that are our immediate neighbours. So one of the initial strategies to organise for the On the Verge campaign was to distribute pamphlets or a brochure to people in our street, knowing that they would be reluctant to engage much further than outside their street. We're still surrounded by one another as we pass through our neighborhoods on the way to open spaces, parks to walk the dog, get exercise, stuff like that. And so there's limitations around what people will and won't be comfortable with. And that would probably change a lot as well, depending on your neighborhood, class, demographics, things like that. But in where I live, people are still freely moving, I would say. Like, we've got lots and lots of people utilizing outdoor spaces, open spaces a lot more. So yeah, just going hyper local, which actually makes our organizing in some way a lot easier, because we're essentially trying to establish meaningful one-on-one, face-to-face relationships, which we don't always get the opportunity to do because we're so busy trying to organize like the masses, and that can lose its authenticity, for lack of a better word. So yeah, I think it's a good opportunity to maybe hone in on some of those one-on-one, face-to-face methods of organizing.
Thanks. Just to clarify, yep, you guys are already onto it, but the questions, we're directing the questions towards the speakers to start with. Thanks. Thanks, Keith. Would any other speakers like to speak to that question of how to organise in a pandemic?
I can, oh, sorry, Sebastian actually was raising his hand, I think.
Yeah, it was, but you go.
Just briefly, that I also wanted to second what Kegan said about going very, very local at the neighborhood level or similar size territory. I think focusing on the specific needs of your immediate local community is a key thing right now, and that's going to vary depending on the territory. So if food is something that is like access to food is being challenged, that's something you can organize around. If rent is something that's a problem, that's something you can organize around. But I think focusing on the specific needs of the most local level is the best way to go, especially because as G1 and Rodrigo pointed out, it is sometimes dangerous to do any protests beyond that point, especially in a context where the contagion is being used as an excuse for hyper policing. So staying local is not only more efficient, it's also much more safe, and we don't want casualties if we can avoid them.
Sebastian, did you want to answer?
I guess my point of view, it's not a direct contradiction to the last two answers, but one thing that kind of had been occurring to me over time, especially as I've been watching, not just in the States, like Rodrigo was saying about how police action has been getting a lot more brutal, but also just, for example, where I work in Dandenong, there are just bands of police officers just roaming the streets, completely ignoring social distancing norms and stuff like that, because it's a display of power. And they're just going up to, wouldn't you know it, usually, you know, black kids and stuff, and just harassing them as they're going about their day. So I've kind of been thinking where, yeah, obviously we want to be social distancing, but I think at some point we may be pushed as a movement to start kind of pushing the boundaries of legality in terms of having to kind of break the law, all the rules, and start organizing in person in various ways that we can manage that are still kind of safe in terms of the virus. What a lot of trade unionists have found is they tried to do a whole bunch of car protests, and even, you know, to social distance, and this was like about a month ago, and even then the police were starting to arrest them, and as of this day, there are union members that are in legal trouble just for being in their cars at a protest. So I feel like, at least in the medium to long term, the police aren't going to give up those powers, by the way, just because the pandemic started to whittle away. I'd be very surprised. So I think at some point there's going to be, I think, a time where we're going to have to start pushing on that legality, on that boundary of kind of maybe being beyond the law to organize properly. Yeah, I guess that's just me thinking out loud, but yeah.
If I could chime in, coming off what Sebastian was saying is that, yeah, I agree. I think that we got to snap out of it. You know what I mean? Like they snapped out of it in the sense that they're coming, and I think that we need to start coming up with different tactics to respond. I also think though that too, that now is the time as well to start, you know, figuring out creative ways. In our group, we spoke about, you know, I shared with the group that a group dropped a big, huge banner off the Brooklyn Bridge. They dropped a cancel rent banner, and you know, it's a symbolic gesture, but it's a direct action that I think, you know, everybody in New York saw. You know what I'm saying? And I think that it's important that we, you know, get out to the streets, whether we see it as safe or not. You know, I know that everybody. I've been blessed. I'm not in the Bronx right now. I had to get out of the Bronx because it was crazy. But like people in my hood in the Bronx, it's like a normal thing out there. Like they not quarantining, and you know, so I think that I definitely think that it's time to start hitting the streets and, you know, maybe being a little less scared than the media has made us to be. Social distancing and being safe, but at the same time, not being on house arrest. I was making jokes. I'm like, yo, they figured it out. They got the whole country on house arrest. Without no judge or a jury, they got us all on house arrest. And, you know, eventually we're gonna have to go outside.
One of the things that we were sharing in the breakout session too was one of the things that we're getting moving here in Chicago is having mobile sound systems. And so as a way to be able to, you know, we're clear that they're trying to ban protests in the street. They're trying to ban gatherings and they're trying to ban culture from the public space. And so one of the things that we're doing here is putting together mobile stages, mobile sound system stages, you know, a flatbed hitched to the back of a truck to be able to, one, have culture on the street. So we know that there's a lot of cultural workers that are going to be out of work for the next year or two. And so the idea of still being able to bring culture to our communities while still practicing some type of social distancing and still being able to stay healthy. And then also using that infrastructure for mobile protests. We've seen a lot of stuff happening here with people in cars. There's people that have, you know, joined on their bikes and kind of, you know, doing stuff where they surround the prisons. There's been a huge demand to free them all, to free all the prisoners, you know what I mean, that are in confined spaces that are being given death sentences, you know what I mean, for minor what they call crimes. And so to me, that's one of the things we got to do. We got to start innovating, be creative with how we use infrastructure, knowing that at the same time, you know, all conspiracy theories aside, this situation is being used to shift the global economy, to shift it to a digitalized, more top-down fascist control of the population. And so how do we respond? I think that we need to innovate with the digital joints and whatever technologies are available to us and be able to infiltrate, to interrupt with technology. But at the same time, we can't leave the street. We can't, no podemos soltar la calle, como dicen.
Thanks heaps, everyone. Maybe I'll bring up the next question. There's just a lot of conversation been going on in the chat. If people want to check into there, but I'll also read it out. So we had a question from Ani asking, what does it mean to organize locally if you're localized somewhere with all the resources? For example, wealthy states like Australia. I'm assuming that's what is referred to. How do we push back against localization in a way to share resources outside of the state? If the speakers would like to speak to that point.
Go, Kegan.
I'll be honest here. I would consider myself to be in one of the more affluent suburbs of Melbourne's inner north, a suburb called Alphington that's not it's not known by many people or many people at all, but it is quite affluent. And so I think if we're able to organise locally in the suburb, let's say, and in doing so acknowledge that people around us in other suburbs have less access to resources, then you're starting to break down that segregation. But that disparity needs to be acknowledged very early on. So maintaining and developing solidarity across geographical lines is essential. And then that starts to go down the road of like, how do you actually institutionalize demographic, like over wide territories? Like, how do you actually set up structures that can transcend geography? And then you're starting to get into like what I consider to be fairly complex modes of organization, which I think is why a lot of us are here, to figure out how we can do that in the long term.
Would any other speakers like to pick up on that point before we move on to the next question?
We go to the next question, yeah?
Yep, all right, cool. Thanks everyone for your patience. The next question, and maybe our final question, because we're heading towards our time limit before wrapping up and going out with the performance from Rebel Diaz. Maybe the last question is from Natalie, and she asks, what are people's thoughts about radical childhood education in times of crisis and increased surveillance state? What are examples of community education in other movements? So if the panelists would like to respond to that question.
I think that's a great question. I've been thinking, you know, I have a 5-year-old son, and, you know, I think that more than ever, we need community just for like mental health. You know, the kids, I feel like we have no idea the drastic change that these young folk, like, you know, my son's 5, and emotionally he's like, the day he woke up and he's like, oh, I miss, you know, it made me laugh, because he's like, I miss going to Target. It's like a big, like a Walmart type thing, you know? But it was like, he's like, then I'm like, what else do you miss? He's like, I miss my friends, I miss school. And so what we're seeing is that for a lot of these young people, you know, my son is in a good space, but I know a lot of kids who are poor, that they don't have the home structure to be able to adapt to this new idea of you know, of this new education and the technology. And I think that it's a really key thing as a movement, because that's where the future, I'm telling you, these educational systems are gonna all go, mark my words, they're gonna all go on Zoom and Google, and Bill Gates and all these people are gonna run to the bank. They're all making deals. This is like neoliberalism 2.0, 2.5. All the tech companies are making deals with the states right now, as we speak, in New York, Chicago. And so how do we as a community, as a movement, try to re-grasp and like, it's an opportunity now. Okay, the kids aren't being forced to go to school. What does homeschooling look like from radical collectives? I think it's super important. The Graffiti Museum, I'll share something real simple. The Graffiti Museum, which is like a a crew of homies. I don't even think it's a physical museum. They're online, based out of Miami. They put out every Friday. They put out free coloring books, right, for the kids. And every Friday I go and download them, and it gives my son a couple hours to be sitting there drawing. I think that's a great concept. You know what I mean? The idea to put out like informational workshops that could be used like curriculum-wise for kids that you could put out for free online and tell parents like, yo, download this every Friday. Here's the curriculum for the kids for the week. You know what I mean? I think that's very possible. I think the same way that they're doing this, we have to adapt and be like, all right, let's send out these curriculums. I know educators out there that are radical have some type of curriculums for the kids, right? Massify them. Send me that link so I could download it every Friday and give my son the work plan. You know what I mean? I don't know if it sounds too simple, but I think that's an immediate, like right now, if you got something, send it to us on Friday and we send it to all the people out here. You know what I mean? So yeah, I've been doing a lot of homeschooling today. Today I taught my son geography. You know what I'm saying? He just realized that DJ Illinois is named after Chicago, Illinois. But we're trying, and it's definitely a process too. And I think that not pushing the young children is also an important thing. I think that mental health, there's been more domestic abuse, more violence at home than ever for so many people during this quarantine era. Levels of alcoholism are going up in the hood. Drug use is going up. You're seeing a lot of people I know frustrated with their kids because for the first time, you got to actually be with them for 24 hours a day and not drop them off at the professional babysitters that they do, otherwise known as schools. So, yeah, I think that it's a new moment and we got to adapt as families, as people, as community, we got to adapt and we need that support. Word.
For the last 6 weeks, I've been a 7th grade teacher, a 3rd grade teacher, and a preschool teacher. I'm raising 3 daughters over here in the Chi, and it's wild because, I'm lucky to have a partner that she's working, and I work independently, so I've had the space to be able to build with my little girls here at the crib. But it's wild because at the same time, I'm starting to reject even the online work that they get from their schools because it's in the same sphere, in the same kind of model that they were learning in before, but just digitalized. And so it's still very much memorization and this and that. So one of the things we've done, we got access to a little garden plot, and we started planting some seeds, and they just starting to sprout right now over here. And it's wild because through that process, we're doing math, we're doing science, we're doing history, and starting to really learn how to like do education based on our daily lives. And what more basic than, how we grow our food or how we eat. And we're trying to find spaces to do math with something as simple as washing dishes or, cooking food, or every daily routine that we may have in the house, somehow being able to create education out of that, as opposed to just following the same model that's, memorization and the empire's ways of teaching and the content that they teach. So I think I agree with Rao, what you're saying. Like, we just need to create more to be able to share those processes. One of the things we're doing now, we're doing a garden with the kids, and we've been filming the whole process, so we'd be able to share with other people and other parents the process and what mistakes we made and what we did right, what we did wrong, how we integrated math, how we integrated history, geography, all of that into this simple process of growing some food. And so I think that's something that we're discovering as we go along too, because it's a learning process for us as parents to be able to see how we do it and then not keep it within our own little family unit, being able to share the knowledge and being able to spread it in our experiences with the rest of the community.
Thanks. Thanks heaps, guys. Is there any other speakers that like to speak to that question before we start to wrap up?
I can speak briefly to that question.
Yeah.
I have seen a lot of collectives of either students or professionals or just workers with skills to share that have formed sort of around this problem of education. just gathering together, usually around some kind of skill or knowledge set that they'll have, and then putting out resources primarily on social media. Because one of the big problems we're having with digitalizing education, which is what the government is obviously trying to do, is that like a lot of people don't have reliable internet access here, especially if you go out to the countryside or even in the city, but just in poorer neighborhoods, the signal is not reliable. And a lot of homes like maybe don't have internet access. So you'd have people relying on their phone signal and maybe a plan that only allows them a certain amount of gigabytes of access to social media websites. So a lot of collectives of usually young professionals, but also students and also workers have gotten together and put out resources depending on the area. So, I mean, yesterday I saw on Instagram going around for like mothers of young children, things that they could do from a group of, it was a collective of women who were studying or had recently finished studying basic education. So they had like some socio-emotional tips, and also on their page also had available like learning and teaching resources. So that kind of like sharing of knowledge, mostly done through social media, is what I've seen. And from what I understand, also coordinated through some community assemblies, where that can be like a need that the community assembly will identify as like being something that comes up in the community. A lot of kids maybe don't have access to decent schooling, and so they'll get in touch with a collective and ask for resources and see about distributing those through the community. That's one way I've seen that kind of be organized, but it's difficult, and it's especially difficult given the difficulty of access to the internet and technology in some areas here.
Thanks so much, Dani. All right, maybe if there's no other responses to that question, we might start to wrap up and head into the performance by Rebel Diaz to finish up. There's a couple of other questions about how to push back against border controls, and how to, and some proposals for how to better organize the people in this group and beyond. And so maybe we'll pick up on some of these threads in the coming weekends. So this is just the first of 3 of these mini conferences of Pandemic People Power that's going to happen. There's 2 organized for next weekend. So just quickly to give a heads up, we're going to, if people would like to, if you like the LASNet Solidarity Facebook page, you'll be able to get more information about the upcoming events and all the information from the speakers today. And also you can send your email to lasnet.solidarity@gmail.com for to be on the mailing list. So coming up next week, there's going to be speakers Bo Spearham from Warriors of the Aboriginal Resistance in Meanjin, Brisbane, and the Brisbane Aboriginal Sovereign Embassy. Ronnie Karenni, a Canberra-based West Papuan activist, and his band, the Black Orchid String Band. And Rachel Herzing from the Center for Political Education, Anti-Imperialist Organizers in the USA, with some more speakers from Latin America, is planned for next weekend. So, and some more musicians and performances. So it would be great if people interested to come along and see you next weekend and spread the word through your networks. Thank you so much for everyone who's participated and patience with us with this new form of conference. And we'll intro out to the Rebel Diaz guys to give a performance as our closing. Thank you again so much, Solidarity.
What up, G? How we gonna do this?
Love you.
What's up, my bro?
Hey, I just sent you a cool video on WhatsApp. Maybe you could show it since my audio's jacked.
Sure. What's so not the YouTube joint?
Oh, if you have the YouTube one, that'd be great. Should I introduce it? Share it that way, maybe?
We already showed one of yours in the beginning.
Ya, but Lucho.
¿Qué pasó?
This is a new video. We just released it. It's about the estallido social in Chile from the New York brothers out here. We just put it out today, so I don't know if anybody's seen it. This is brand new. So we'll show it to you guys real quick, and then maybe Chico do some live performance since you got the
Yeah,
mic.
good. Claro, buena loco.
Buena, guacho.
Buena, guacho.
Yeah, let me know if you can't hear it. I'm gonna try to make it work.
All right. Dale.
¿Se escucha?
No se escucha.
No. I think when you screen share, you need to tick share audio. That's what I stuffed up on before. So when you press screen share.
Let me try one more time.
Yeah, there's like a little box in the bottom. This is lesson on Zoom for everyone watching.
For real. Okay, so I'm putting share and then it says
G, de repente, quizás mejor porque está en inglés. I'll show Lucho the video in Chile later. Do you want to see the organizing commandments, the organizing agreements? That's the one that's in your WhatsApp.
Okay, I'm still not figuring out if I can get this audio working.
We put the video in Spanish up in the webpage. No problem.
Okay. En el background de Lucho profesional, mi brother.
Dilo en inglés.
I said Lucho's a professional. Check him out.
Dilo en inglés, por loco.
My bad. Lucho, you're a professional. I love it. All right, let's see if this works.
Y'all seeing my screen?
Yeah.
All right, let me see. Let me know if you don't hear the audio. You hear the audio?
No. It looks great though.
Yeah, Rod. We don't have the audio, Rod. So maybe
that's cool.
You keep that a cappella, those 10 organizing commandments?
Send the link to the chat.
I'm just gonna rap over here, bro. I'm gonna do a song.
All right, cool. And then I kick some after you do.
I'll go first. You hear that? You hear the beat?
Yeah, I hear it. Dale.
Anywhere that I am. Yo, the love of revolution, the life that I lead. Es por eso que yo, por la familia que yo quiero, for my beautiful niece. Es por eso que yo, for the future of the youth that remind me of me. Es por eso que yo, para Chile, for Chicago, for the kids of Halsey. Es por eso que yo. Look, I dedicate this to them kids that remind me of me. Those rebellious little suckers that I call MCs. Them kids on the corners in them circles, spitting rhythms, dripping ciphers, smoking purple since they were still children, buying 40s, giving money to the kid with ID. 6 heads on one blunt, but they sharing the tree. Forget school, they told jokes and they never took notes. All they did was fill their notebooks with some marvelous flows. Staring out the window, daydreaming of shows, the limelight, the right life, how they bound to blow. It's a dream that they all share. Who gonna get there? Found a reason for my rap and I ain't gonna fake it. I want a crib for my mom's on the beach of Viña. Yeah, por eso que yo. I want to open up a school in the Bronx by the river. Yeah, por eso que yo. Yeah, I'll be happy with a crib and some land in the back. Yeah, por eso que yo. Yeah, sit back, smoking the L, dipping cognac. Yeah, por eso que yo. Look, sipping water out the wine glass, smile on my face. Funny farmer's hat on to keep the sun on my face. I'll be content with teaching children and building a young struggle. If hip hop organized, the whole world would be in trouble. Bush run for cover, you be getting bum rush. We'll get Bovada as the president, we all cold crush. It's graffiti on the wall, but it's not advertising. Just a warning from the youth about the future uprising. Not surprising that we seeking freedom. I don't believe them, I'll be happy with a Cavalier. Like my dad drove a living room with chandeliers and a magic carpet. I choose to rap because sometimes it's my only option. It's my freedom of expression, it's the voice of the oppressed. Yeah, por eso que yo. It's the power of the word, man. They gotta use it. Yeah, por eso que yo. Yo. Because I truly do believe that I'm the seed of revolution. I rap, therefore I am part of the vocal contribution to the causes worldwide. Fight the struggle within. Organize, read books, practice discipline. Use
the culture as a weapon that's unknown to them. Speak slang in the language that's cold to them. Make music, break dance, write your name on a wall. Write a paper theorizing how they kill Biggie Smalls. Include Pac and Malcolm X, how they killed them all. Be a leader on the block, we taking over the game. Cause instead of gang banging and acting selfish, we like some Panthers in the morning. Serving breakfast for the love of revolution, for the life that I lead. Es por eso que yo, por la familia que yo quiero, for my beautiful niece. Es por eso que yo, yeah, for the future of the youth that remind me of me. Es por eso que yo, para Chile, for Chicago, for the kids on Halsey. Es por eso que yo. ¿Se escuchó bien o no?
Sí.
¿No?
Buena, guacho.
Ya voy a hacer otra ya que estamos hijos, pero esta es nueva, esta no la ha escuchado nadie. Esta es fresh off the press, no está ni grabada. Permiso, compañero, aquí vamos. Yes. Here we go, y'all. This is a working class rapper song. Look, y'all. Welcome to the world of a working class rapper. I'm not afraid to say the things that really matter. Welcome to the world of a working class rapper. I'm not afraid. Look, I wake up every day to try to figure out the business part. But sometimes I just get caught up in my art. I do way more than rap. I manage, I promote, I organize, I revolt. And in between I spit quotes. I've been known to roam the globe. Look, I did shows, sold merch, then I came back home with enough to pay my rent and go and do it some more. Cause you know there's no fear like Nina Simone. And I ain't had a 9 to 5 since 2005. That's when I really took the dive to go and keep this dream alive. Though I never made a million, I never made a killing. I'm thankful that my art allows me to make a living. Like, welcome to the world of a working class rapper. I'm not afraid to say the things that really matter. Welcome to the world of a working class rapper. I'm not afraid, yo. And no matter where I go, I'm hip hop, and that's a fact, yeah. They keep calling me back. And no matter where I go, I'm hip hop, and that's a fact. Look, they keep calling me back. Sometimes I wanna quit. I ain't never had a hit, but it's some stupid little things that make you feel like you ain't shit. Like, damn, I ain't popping on the gram. I might never win a Grammy, but I still got my family like, whoa. It's like my streams are low, but I still got comrades all over the globe. So if I quit, then capitalism wins, and I ain't out here in these streets in my hoodie and Timbs. I miss building with the KKs, the Kembas, and the Capos. Southern Boulevard, the street soldier in his camo. I'm from La Era de Panteras, wearing sweaters. COINTELPRO was a setup, so let's not forget it. Yo, I'm a worker. Compañero, yo trabajo. I quit college. It's a straight Viva del Lago. I quit college, man, but I be on these college panels. The streets gave me knowledge. I talk Marx with the famo. Welcome to the world of a working class rapper. I'm not afraid to say the things that really matter. Welcome to the world of a working class rapper. I'm not afraid. Look, and no matter where I go, I'm hip hop, and that's a fact. Yeah, they keep calling me back. And no matter where I go, I'm hip hop, and that's a fact. Yeah, they keep calling me back. That's it, y'all. That's my joint for the day. G Weezy, they todo cabrones. I didn't even put that out. That was y'all the only ones who ever heard it.
Buena. Buena, cabrón.
Yeah.
Buena, guacho.
Buena, guacho.
Seguimos aquí derrumbando la frontera. Se escucha ahí, se escucha.
Ah, sí, excelente, buena.
Sí, aquí estamos. Hoy día vamos a derrumbar esa frontera desde el Bronx, de Chicago, a so-called Australia. Mucho amor, mi gente, así va. Me dicen que no soy de aquí, que no me quieren porque saben que yo soy de allá, que no me entienden porque creen que yo soy de aquí. But you don't get it, homie, porque yo no soy de allá. No se deja explicar yo, mamá auxilia, papá papá exiliado, cabros creados en diferentes lados. Uno en donde rojo el pasaporte, el otro nace en territorio hostil. Gringo en la net donde el dólar manda y no se hablan de la desigualdad. En la guata del mismo imperio que busco matar a mi viejo. Es un peso que yo llevo dentro mi mente, dentro de mi gente, dentro de mi mente, la frontera, que la viva la frontera. La frontera está surgido cuando vino a mi gente, una vez más de esta autoliente. Let's go, y si dicen que no, que no me quieren porque saben que yo, que no me entienden porque creen que yo, what you don't get it, homie, porque yo no se deja aplicar. Y cuando dicen que somos de aquí o somos de allá, es un esfuerzo de dividirnos. Nosotros estamos unidos, we're united, across the board, using this technology to connect together. Much love, mi gente. Let's go, let's go, let's go. Buena. Ahí se me fue la letra un poquito, pero compartiendo. Nice to share with y'all in the digital space.
Woo!
Y les dejo con una última. Esta se llama Levantamos. Y sabemos, we know that in these times of resistance, we also have to make the time for joy, to be able to celebrate with ourselves, with our community, with our families, to be thankful, and at the same time, being able to hold those two emotions together, resistance and also celebration. And that to us is the essence of hip hop. This joint is called Levantamos. Vámonos. Sí. Y si se escucha muy bien, ojalá. Si escuchan mi voz, guará. Una mano arriba, así, come on.
Ven a ver lo que pasa cuando tú y yo nos levantamos. Ven a ver lo que pasa cuando tú y yo nos levantamos. Ven a ver lo que pasa cuando tú y yo nos levantamos. Ven a ver lo que pasa cuando tú y yo nos levantamos.
Vamos, dame la mano, dame lo que puede ser si nos levantamos. Cada uno por su lado, todos unidos. Cada quien como tiene que lo divino. Como son las cosas hoy en día, se necesita toda esa alegría. Y si la guerra sigue, muévete por la paz. Por esta vez que sea con ganas, nada de Kumbaya. Capital, no hace falta en este intercambio. Entrada liberada, todo invitado. Para los marginados, para los excluidos, para los que no hacen fila, yo no asimilo. Pido paz y lo rimo en mi existencia. Sol y sonrisa donde aparezca la experiencia de una nueva posibilidad. Un mundo nuevo junto al pueblo se va a crear. Vamos para allá.
Ven a ver lo que pasa cuando tú y yo nos levantamos. Ven a ver lo que pasa cuando tú y yo nos levantamos. Ven a ver lo que pasa cuando tú y yo nos levantamos. Ven a ver lo que pasa cuando tú y yo nos levantamos.
Buena. Ojalá se escuchó bien ahí. Mucho amor y para nosotros we are very inspired and energized to be connecting with y'all and seeing how y'all are organizing over there.
Buena foto.
Oye, Lucio, invítame un café, a un latte.
Buena.
Invítame un latte y cuando estamos.
Sí, loco, buena.
What up, Joe? What up, Marion? What up, Sebastian? Todos están ahí.
Saludos por allá.
Anisas, tú, ¿qué va, Yolo? Natalie. Buena, Ali, ahí está la Ali, le tiré la llora a la Ali. Ya, cabrón, nos queremos mucho.
Sí, por la Ani, ahí está la Ani.
Ali was a security guard.
For real.
El Sunil también estaba, el Sunil.
Sunil, where's Sunil keeping it real?
Se fue.
Marion, we lived in Marion's home.
Sunil, keep it real.
Marisol. Saludos. Les mando a todos. Hey guys, Illinois no pudo venir porque estaba enfermo, pero le mandó muchos saludos. Está mejorándose. Yeah, our DJ Illa, I think he had the COVID, so he's getting better.
Oye, dile al Bitoco que se conecte para la próxima. Oye, dile al Bitoco que se conecte para la próxima.
Yo le digo.
No, dale.
Our music is available at Rebel Diaz on every platform, iTunes, Spotify, whatever. But if you want, everybody here's our people though. So if you don't want to pay for the music, hit me up. I'll send you music. You already know.
Send the links.
Yeah, I'll put the links in the chat.
Thanks so much, everyone. Thanks so much, everyone. We're going to wrap up. See you all next week. Much love.
Chao, chiquillas. Chao,
Muchas
chiquitos.
gracias.
Chao, cabros.
Bye. Chao. Que estén bien.
Buena. Buena, Lucho. Buena, loco. Buena, guacho. Buena, guacho. Buena, Lucho. Buena. Ándate para la casa. Buena, loco.
Buena.
Estamos. Resultó me costó 5 cafés.
Ya, ahí me mandáis el latte.